On December 14, 2012, the nation was stunned by the senseless, unthinkable, inconceivable act of violence that struck the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. The gunman, Adam Lanza, opened fire, killing 20 children and 6 adults before turning the gun on himself. One word that has been repeated over and over again is why. But the real question is what? What can be done to prevent these school shootings from happening any further? On today's show, we will meet a school teacher and clinical psychologist to discuss what can be done to stop the tragic, unnecessary shootings that claim the lives of innocent children and students. Stay with us. Have been on the rise since the Columbine tragedy back in 1999. Today our guests are going to share what their expert advice is on what parents and schools can do to help make the school day a lot safer. Joining us today is a school teacher from the New York State juvenile justice system. His name is James Muller. James, thanks for being here today. Also joining us are 2 clinical psychologists, one being Dr. James C. Strickland, PhD, licensed clinical psychologist. And on the end, we have Dr. Victoria Miles, also a psychologist and PhD. Thank you all so much for being here today and discussing this important topic on what parents can do at home to try to better their kids who might be going through tough times and feel that they have no other way out and go into schools and open fire. I mean, this is what we're hoping to put a stop to today. So, James, I'm going to start with you. Working in the juvenile system as a special ed teacher, actually, what are your security measures in the school that you work for?
Well, where I work, it's basically a closed facility. So in other words, there's no access for people that are not in the building itself. In other words, I have to swipe in and out everywhere I go. Mm-hmm. The students do not leave the premises either. They stay there. They actually are residents there.
Wow.
It's almost like a college dorm.
Right. So it's almost kind of like, I don't want to say like a jail, but like a correctional facility type thing.
It is basically a correctional facility, right? It's I guess much nicer than what you would expect a correctional facility to look like, but it is basically that's what it is.
And you've been teaching for 7 years, so you've actually worked in several other high schools.
Yes.
How does this specific school differ from past schools that you've taught in as far as their security goes?
Well, all the schools I've worked in are public schools. Some were on Long Island, some of them were in the city, or one of them was in the city. So those, especially the city school itself, had a scanning procedure, basically like an airport. You have to go through, have your bags checked, you get x-rayed, all of the same procedures you would go if you're like boarding a flight to, I don't know.
Wow.
The school I work at now is completely unique in the fact that, again, the kids stay there. So, and again, anything that comes in and out, like if the parents bring something or anything like that, it's supposed to be checked. But we do have a bit of a concern as to whether or not they're actually checking everything that's coming in and out, and how really detailed and specific they're getting with that. So we do have a concern there. Yeah.
So you don't believe that they're doing their job to the best of their ability when it comes to that?
I don't know if they are, and the reason I say that is because I hear things, and we did have an incident where there was a bottle of vodka that got snuck in the school. That, in my opinion, is a very dangerous situation. Because it could be a weapon, it could be something much more dangerous than a bottle, which in itself, a glass bottle is pretty dangerous in a school like that.
Especially, I was just going to say, in a school like that. Right. So what is the age group of the students that you teach in that school?
Basically from about 13 to 17.
So they're very young.
18-year-olds, yeah. All high school, yeah. And some even middle school, technically middle school.
And what can you tell us about them that landed them in this specific type of school?
Depends. I mean, there's a whole plethora of things. It could be anything from they stole something like someone's iPod. They were bullies. Like they beat a kid up and stole money. They a lot of times it's family violence. They've attacked a sibling. They've hurt a family member. We have really everything. Kids that mugged people. We have a girl who basically stabbed someone. So we have the gauntlet of problematic children. Really,
right.
That's really what it is.
Do you think any of them have the potential to do like what Adam Lanza had done and just go into a school or go into this particular school and just open fire, even though with the security measures and being that they can never leave, it might be very difficult, but
Right.
you can make a weapon pretty much out of anything these days. I mean, do you have any concerns in the back of your mind as a teacher in this school?
Yes, definitely. It is a concern. It was actually more of a concern previous to this because we did have one student who really said on Halloween, October 31st, 2012, he's going to attack the staff and he's going to sneak something in. So it is a concern of mine, yes. It turns out that kid is just an example of someone who's, trying to create fear.
Yeah.
But it is an issue, and it used to keep me up at night. It does less now, but
Yeah.
I think it's more. I've gotten more used to being there than so much that it's safer.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
What would be the disciplinary action on a situation like that?
If he attacks staff, or they do attack staff, they end up getting. It's happened a couple times. Not myself personally, but other people. No teachers. But they do end up usually getting suspended from school. They have certain privileges revoked. Like they go down what they call levels. So they end up like the highest level they can basically leave and come and go as they please. The lowest level is where they're knocked down to in a situation like that. So they have to build themselves back up, which takes months and months and months.
Right.
So there are consequences definitely for their actions. Yeah.
Okay. And do you find that the disciplinary actions now might be more stricter, especially with the most recent school shootings, as opposed to, let's say, a year ago?
I don't, and I think it should be. I think that with the situation that happened, again, they should be looking at the things that are coming in and out very, very clearly, very specifically. I mean, unless they've changed it and have been quiet about it, I don't know. But I definitely think that was a wake-up call and say, okay, we got to make sure we really check and make sure that nothing illegal or nothing forbidden is getting in this building. So I would say I wish it changed more, to summarize what I'm saying, and besides, as far as I know, it hasn't.
Okay. Do you think your school could do something differently than what they're doing now to make, let's say, you feel safer every day?
Honestly, scanning. They could scan everyone coming in, every bag, every package, every day. At least not staff, but when they have visitors and the kids have visitors, because it is also a dangerous area in its own too. So I think anyone who comes in the building, if they went through a scanning procedure, it would probably be a safer situation.
And what could you tell us about the parents of the kids that come to visit them? I mean, do some of these kids maybe come from like broken homes, maybe domestic violence is in the home?
Absolutely.
So, like, what could you tell us about the parents, though? Because, like, what I'm thinking is, who's to say, like, the parents aren't bringing them something to, like, maybe help them bust out or help them to hurt somebody? I mean, it is out there, as crazy as it might sound. It's happened.
It absolutely is. I mean, that's one of my concerns, definitely.
Yeah.
Again, I feel a little more safer now because I've got to know some of them better, and that comes into play. But I definitely could see parents doing something like that, because some of the parents are actually in prison themselves.
Oh, wow.
Or have been involved with the particular student or with the students in whatever incident got them locked up in the first place.
It's really sad. I mean, to have to be placed into so young, 13 to 17, and they're in this. It's almost like they are in jail.
Right.
And it's sad to say that some of them are probably going to end up in jail by the time they're 21. So
that is the fear. That this will be a cycle, and that's what you are trying to stop it from being a cycle. But
exactly.
it's not easy. That's for sure. So it's entire cultural thing. You want to try to end the cycle, get them educated, get them, teach them the things that you and I learned when we were just little kids.
Right.
Common things that they've never had to learn or never were exposed to.
And respect being one of them. I think
Respect,
it all starts
absolutely.
with, having no respect
Right.
for yourself, for life.
Absolutely, definitely. It's simple. Again, simple things. Please and thank you. And I was saying to everyone that before we went on air was that one kid today entirely seriously used the F word in class, and not in a context like screw you or something. It was more like in a context of talking about the subject and just throws this word in there. And
it was just in there as part of the sentence.
Right, and that's something that you and I socially would not do.
Exactly.
So there's an example right there. Of, the issues that we face.
And has your school done anything to approach the students, maybe hold like an assembly and say, listen, due to the recent school shootings, things are going to be different, security is going to be cracking down. Have they addressed the subject of the recent shootings at all?
No, it has not actually not come up, and you would think it would have.
Yeah.
I've never brought it up personally, and we never really discussed it, so no, it was never even mentioned. I was at work when that happened, or when I heard about it, and it really should have been something that was discussed a bit more. I think in meetings and things like that, behind closed doors. I'm saying, but I think it would have been a good thing to discuss amongst ourselves.
Right.
How we are we concerned and things of that nature, but they seem to kind of avoid those kind of conversations.
Yeah, and being that you've been teaching, I just want to rewind a little bit. You've been teaching for 7 years altogether. Going back to the situation where one of the staff members had gotten hurt by one of the students there.
Right.
I'm sure dealing with students on a daily basis, having the same students day in and day out for the whole year, is there things that parents can look for their kids that do live with them and go to like a public school or a Catholic school, let's say, that they could look for to maybe prevent some of this from happening?
In my opinion, I think the panel will agree, is that they need to be, the kids just need to be monitored in general, and I think that these behaviors, you and I might notice in a child, but the parents that are these parents probably don't notice them in their child, or they don't necessarily condone these behaviors, and that's the issue.
Right.
I think, at least in the situation where I am. The Adam Lanza situation is a bit different because he came from a middle to upper middle class background, and I kind of feel like someone should have said, "There's something's not right here," And I think he would have stood out a little more. Whereas with these students, they don't stand out as much. If you understand what I'm saying.
Right. Okay, well, if you are just tuning in today, we are talking about the recent school shootings that have happened, specifically the Sandy Hook Elementary School that happened back in December. So talking to James Muller today, who is a school teacher and also 2 clinical psychologists, we're just trying to figure out what would cause a student to go into their school and open fire and how it can be prevented. So also, being that we are talking about shootings and, of course, weapons are involved, guns are involved, what is your view on the U.S. gun control?
It's tough. I understand certain situations where people want to own a weapon, hunting, for instance, or on the East End, you have a lot. I have friends actually who own weapons for safety and security, and I have friends even where I live that own weapons for those reasons. So I do kind of get it. I personally wouldn't want to own one. So I don't think necessarily a ban on guns completely. I definitely think on certain types of guns that's absolutely a necessity. I honestly hate guns personally. I don't relate to why you would ever want to own a weapon. But again, I wouldn't want to say that you shouldn't own one either. If that
Right.
makes sense.
It does. I mean, it's also, I think it's more about, the parents who do have it, for whatever reason, whether they are a police officer, security guard, whatever the case is, it needs to be locked up at the end of the night and not have access to it as Adam Lanza did. I mean, even though I'm trying to remember the story exactly, but it just seemed like it was in plain sight for him. And I think he was very troubled in his mind, and he didn't have the love and support that he needed from both of his parents, from what it sounded like. So I'm going to move on to you, Dr. Strickland. James, please stay with us throughout this conversation for the next half hour. But Dr. Strickland, nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Based on your professional experience, what do you think is going through these students' minds that feel they have to go in and open fire on their peers?
Right. Well, Jason, I think the question you have and many of others have is, how are mass shooters made? And I think the focus needs to be on societal issues, institutional issues, as well as family and personal responsibility. I think some of the issues we need to look for is how kids in general, how do they react to disappointment? Can they delay gratification? Can they endure frustration tolerance? It's telling when you see a child, do they act aggressively when they're disappointed, or if they can't endure frustration, or do they feel free to speak about their thoughts and feelings? That's one pre-incident indicator. That's how we can tell what their coping mechanisms are likely to be without any intervention. Parents need to be involved. as James said, yes, parents need to be involved in their kids' lives. And if they are, they'll be able to notice this. And sometimes they may or may not condemn or condone these issues. But it certainly needs to be focused on. I think, for the most part, focusing on the weapon will, at this point, obfuscate the issue. I think it starts way before that. Weapons procurement has to do with the very last resort of what they do. We need to take a look at how children cope with disappointment and low frustration tolerance. And is it with these issues that we can focus on to enact societal changes in terms of moral relativity, what's right, what's wrong, having teachers be involved, having people in the child's life be more aware of what the child is experiencing. We talk about those who are bullied, or those who bully, those who are bullied. The typical children who do this, we have to think it's kids hurting other kids. It's happening in our schools. So we have to take a look at what's happening as we turn our children over to these institutions for 6 to 8 hours a day. What's happening? Are they being educated? Are the teachers aware? And no doubt they're overloaded. There's upwards of 30 kids, and they have a curriculum that they have to get to go ahead and institute. But I think it's a larger issue. If we really want to prevent these atrocities from occurring, okay, I think we really have to focus on those other issues more so than certain gun bans or gun-free school zones. I know it's a touchy topic now, but it seems like after all these atrocities that happen, gun control is legislated, it happens, it's feel-good, but then it never really is effective. As we see now, each time we seem to enact more gun control, the crimes become even more heinous.
So do you think, in your professional experience of what you do, that it's not so much having access to the guns as it is to just have the love and support of the family for these kids not to snap, as I want to say? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not really, the guns aren't really the issue. It's the lack of love and support these kids are getting from their parents that might drive them to do this.
It's more than just the parents. There's other issues too, but I certainly think, okay, weapons should be secured from all unauthorized personnel. Absolutely. If you are, background checks, absolutely, there should be. Okay.
Right.
As far as banning a certain class of weapons, that doesn't seem to work. But like I said, I don't want to focus on the weapon. I want to focus on policies and procedure that will actually go ahead and prevent these types of crimes.
And we've done several shows since we premiered on the air last year on bullying. I mean, that's another big epidemic. Could students that are bullied lead up to them opening fire?
It could. Sometimes one of the two reasons that we come across are those people who are angry, all right, and those who are envious. All right. Somebody who is angry may want to somehow exact revenge, and not necessarily on a specific child, but they somehow want to hurt society. So what do? We go after society's most prized possessions. We go after the children.
Right.
We, as in the terms of the people who perpetrate these crimes. And we have to remember, this is a crime. All right, law-abiding people don't do this. Okay, it's a criminal action, and it's difficult to legislate away criminal action. Murder's been against the law for as long as I can remember, yet it still doesn't seem to prevent it from happening.
Right.
So that's why I think it's a larger societal problem in terms of moral relativity, institutions. We need to teach our children how to process their emotions and their thoughts, how they solve problems. If you ever see young children play, as soon as they get frustrated, sometimes their desire is to maybe strike out and to get physical. And that's not necessarily, that would be a good indicator. If you see your child becoming aggressive as a means of solving a problem, then there's an indicator where a parent can jump right on that and begin. I also think children need to know, even adolescents, they need to know that they can go to their parents and discuss these issues. There needs to be that type of relationship in place. That will do a lot more preventing of this than any sort of legislation that can come down the pipe.
What are some signs that parents should be looking for in their kids that there might be something wrong, maybe emotionally unstable, or what are some common signs that parents should be on the lookout for?
Okay, I'll go back to when a child is disappointed by something. Okay, they usually get angry, and that's because they want something to be different than is actually happening.
So that's one sign to be
That's
on the
one.
lookout
Take a
for.
look. If they get angry and they stomp and they get physically aggressive by breaking or throwing things, there's a sign. Okay, their coping mechanism isn't working. They need to be able to process their thoughts. That's one. The ability to delay gratification. If they have a hard time doing that, that's another one. Also, sportsmanship. If you take a look at when a team loses, all right, how do they respond? Do they throw their glove on the ground? Do they kick the bats? Do they kick helmets? Or do they thank the winning team, for the game, and they say, okay, what do I need to do to be better to do it again next time?
Right.
It all has to do with how you process disappointment. Okay, when you want something a certain way and you don't get it, how are you going to react? Are you going to become vengeful? Or are you going to figure out what you need to do to solve the problem in an adaptive way?
Right.
We just need to be aware that children need to be, and the kids, the adolescents, the adults too, need to be educated on how to solve a problem without resorting to violence. And I think that's one of the issues that needs to be focused on. We teach kids a lot, but I don't see anything perhaps on cognitive behavioral therapy in any courses, which needs to be taught really from a very early age.
Right. So how should parents approach their children on this subject? Should parents even go to their children, especially based on the recent events, and say, just talk to them? I mean, how should parents approach the subject of what's happened in these schools?
Well, certainly when an incident comes like this, speak in age-appropriate terms to the children, especially if they're affected by it. Okay? See what their thoughts are. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And what do they think needs to be done about it? And, engage in a conversation with your child on how to deal with anger, with aggression, and hostility. How would they solve the problem differently? And they can role play back and forth. Use real life situations to discuss alternative, viable solutions other than what we see on the TV. Because oftentimes when this happens, copycat crimes arise almost all the time. It's predictable. So the idea is that
it's almost like one wants to be better than the last.
That's exactly what happens. Now they feel like somebody's been outdone. That's why the crimes seem to become more and more heinous, despite the fact that we have gun-free school zones.
Okay. Well, Dr. Strickland, thank you very much for sharing your advice with us. And again, please stay with us as I move on to Dr. Victoria Miles now. Victoria, thank you for joining us today as well. If any, what is your experience in dealing with troubled teens as a clinical psychologist?
In my earlier years, I dealt with them in a group home. They ranged from different disorders, from depression to schizophrenia. And it was education they did go outside of the facility for, and they would come back and then they would partake in a day treatment program. And it was just very interesting to see them because the family dynamic really wasn't there. A lot of them came from abusive homes or just a home where they had one parent, and they really just did not have effective coping skills to deal with their emotions. And that's really where a lot of the problems came in.
Yeah, and it seems like there are so many children out there that do come from broken homes, that there's domestic violence or there's alcoholism and alcohol abuse. And I mean, is there hope for these types of kids? Can they get help?
That's pretty much why these programs are set up. It's really to try to address it and stop a cycle from happening. They say if you come from an abusive home that you're likely to repeat it, and that's really what they're trying to stop. And that's really where the hope is to get them, as soon as there is a problem, to try to correct it and allow them to process their information, process their emotions, to deal with it and get them as much help as soon as a problem arises, rather than waiting years before it's recognized that there's even an issue.
Right. I mean, just thinking about the Adam Lanza case and what's been on the news about that, all the stations, keep saying that there's been mental health issues involved. Is that really even an excuse that can be used? Based on, and Dr. Strickland, you can answer this too. Is it really an excuse? Oh, he has mental health issues, that's why he did this. And
I don't think it's an excuse, but I think it is something to be looked at. Again, that's kind of where it goes back to getting the help as soon as possible, as soon as you realize something's wrong. That can be identified at an early age. again, I don't call it an excuse for shooting anybody, but it definitely takes a part in it. What's going on? How soon were they helped? How are they processing their information? How are they dealing with their emotions? And it all does play into it. Family, social situations, anybody who's socially outcast growing up, they don't know how to properly socially interact. These all play a role. Again, I don't call it an excuse, but it does play a part.
Do you think the bigger part of this problem is children that are mentally unstable rather than having access to firearms in their home?
I think it does play a part. I don't think having access to the gun is going to make somebody shoot. I mean, a gun can be there. It's not going to make anybody make a criminal act just because they have access to it.
Right.
I mean, a hunter isn't going to shoot another hunter just because he can. So that's definitely, I don't think, the issue. I think it's really a last resort that they've been driven to, that they feel they've come to a point where this is their option for seeking revenge or not being able to cope with their environment.
Okay. So if I could just ask you one more question, and it's more of an opinionated question, as I've asked Dr. Strickland. How do you think parents should approach their children on this subject, whether it's talking about what's happened in recent events, or just should they even talk to their kids even about guns in general, especially the younger children?
I think that if they're affected by it and seeing it on TV, it's definitely something that they should address and see how their children are feeling about it, making sure that they realize that this isn't like a video game and that it's not a common day occurrence that should occur, and really let them feel safe, because the younger kids may not necessarily understand why it happened. They may feel for their own safety in the school. They might be afraid. I have a young daughter, so that would be something that if she had a concern about, I would want to address with her. So I definitely think that they should address it with their children at any pretty much age that they would feel safety in seeing it on TV.
Well, the reason I had brought up the younger children is because of the recent event at Sandy Hook Elementary. I mean, I think it's important that parents sit down and talk with their children at a very young age, even if it is about guns, and at least try to make them understand, so as they get older, this won't happen so much, and hopefully we will eliminate this altogether in the very near future. Well, I thank all three of you for being here today and sharing your opinions on this. Thank you very much. More to come. We got to take a break. We'll be right back after this.
Most school shootings occur during the day, with some happening before or after school. Most attackers are between the ages of 13 and 18 years of age. Many of them are bullied. Some suffer from mental health issues. Studies have found that such attacks are almost always planned with few accomplices. Our hearts go out to the families of the victims of Sandy Hook Elementary School and all other victims and families from the past shootings.
Just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of my guests for being here today. Hopefully, thanks to this segment, we will hopefully put an end to school shootings in the very near future. If you'd like more information, including how to get in touch with our panelists today, give us a call at 631-574-9678 or send us an email at thejasonshow@yahoo.com. As always, thank you at home for watching. We'll see you next time.